Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transportation Talks. My name is Michelle Livingstone, and I have the privilege of serving as the moderator for Transportation Talks, which is sponsored by the University of Denver Transportation and Supply Chain Institute. I have the best job because I get to speak to the top leaders in the transportation and supply chain industry. And today we're going to hear from Anne Reinke, President and CEO of IANA. Anne, please join me on camera.
Michelle, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and when we are so delighted to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're wicked busy, but taking time to share your expertise and insight with us is really appreciated. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
So we always like to start with just a little bit of background about our speakers. I know you are certainly well known in certain circles, but we have a pretty broad audience. So tell us about you.
Okay. So I think if you were to look at my LinkedIn profile, you would see that I went to Rice University for undergrad. I went to law school at Wake Forest, and I've had a lot of railroad related jobs, CSX, U.S. Department of Transportation, and then I was at TIA, which represents the 3PLs. But what you wouldn't see about me is that I am a first generation American. My parents are English South Africans, and they came over and they weren't intending to stay. They wanted to change South Africa through American investment. And they almost, I guess they sort of gave up because it just seemed like it would never change. And so they became, I'm not kidding you, they became US citizens like 1 year before Nelson Mandela became president. So if they had just waited maybe one more year, I might not even be here. I'd be in South Africa. But in any event, I appreciate the fact that I have that perspective because it makes me so appreciative of all that we have and, being an American.
That's great. Well, we're glad that you're here for sure. And, things tend to work out the way they're supposed to.
That's
So
right.
really,
That's
this
right.
is where you're supposed to be, and that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you've been at IANA now for just about a year, and you took over from Joni Casey, who was phenomenal. She was certainly a friend of the Transportation and Supply Chain Institute for years. So tell me, what is it that you are really appreciating and valuing from her legacy, and what do you want to bring to IANA as you think about your leadership?
Sure. So I think Joni's legacy uh, is really foundationally in education. And so the relationship that we have with the University of Denver was critical to her. I obviously want to perpetuate that because not only for the benefit of, the institutions that are vital and teach kids today and all of that, but also selfishly because that generation of folks, both, kids and in their careers, like you all teach, can add to the excellence and adaptability of the intermodal industry. So that is absolutely a legacy that Joni Casey should be proud of and that I want to continue for sure. When they hired me, what I heard from the board was we have made the organization very robust. The people who know about intermodal know about IANA. And Joni did a really creditable job doing that. But the people who don't know about intermodal don't know IANA. And so that to me was sort of, all right, we need you to fan out, get a lot more public facing, and make sure that the message of intermodal and IANA gets conveyed, not just to the people who know or should know about it, but to the people who never even thought about it. And so if I had to encapsulate it is, so we were sort of facing inwards and now we're going to be facing outwards. We've hired a vice president of government affairs. We're going to take on a multi-year PR campaign. We've hired a director of economics who can really start mining the data that we have at our fingertips and making it actionable and sort of positioning us as a thought leader in that space. So it's really exciting. It's challenging. There's a lot to do, but it's nice to feel I understand the direction we're going.
Oh, that's great. Well, it certainly sounds like you've got a good vision for the future. So a lot of that obviously depends on what the intermodal industry is doing. And
Right.
certainly the whole rail industry has a lot of change going on in that space right now, I guess would be the understatement of the year. So as you think about the intermodal industry, how do you think it's going to all shake out in the next 5 years?
Sure. So, sometimes intermodal, we wish that we were in charge of our own destiny. And unfortunately, we have not been. And I don't know if that will ever stop or start or what, but we haven't been. And we are very reliant on the freight marketplace writ large, right? And we're very reliant on the over the road trucking marketplace and how that affects us. So right now, we've been in a freight slump affecting every mode, as you know, perpetuated in some senses by the kind of um, uncertainty that we see with tariffs, et cetera. So there is excess capacity in the over the road marketplace, which means that they're highly competitive. Typically, intermodal is far more competitive when capacity for over the road is tighter, just because we can drive a better bargain. We're sustainable, we're typically cheaper, and we have an efficiency that over the road, it's hard to compete when they're competing at such a high price. So that has been challenging for us. But that being said, the tariff environment was it's a double-edged sword because we got a whole lot of volumes earlier this year from folks building up their inventories in advance of any kind of tariff environment. So we had a couple of really good quarters. I think what that means is the rest of the year is going to be pretty flat. And then ultimately what happens next year is probably more of the same until we figure out, we just talked about the Supreme Court is hearing the tariff case today, if that ultimately just ends. One other thing I'd say is rail service is at its highest in the last 5 years. During the pandemic, there was a real challenge to rail service for a number of reasons. And so that has been a big benefit. And so if we have good rail service, we get the capacity sort of right sized in the over the road trucking space. I think that will help.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is certainly one of those interesting dynamics between the long haul truckload and intermodal. And you're right. As things improve, hopefully for us both the trucking and intermodal industries will improve because we certainly can't remain in this freight slump forever.
That's right.
And yeah, for those of us who have been in the industry for 150 years, we know it will come back around. We just have to hang in there.
You
So
got to hang in there. That's right.
hang in there.
That's
That's
right.
right. So, although you're new at IANA, you're certainly not new to the rail industry at all. I know you've got what, 16 years history with the rail. So you've seen a lot of change throughout time. What would you say has been most consistent over the time frame that you've been involved in the industry? And what do you think has changed?
So consistent, I think, is that the railroads still spend a bunch of money on maintenance and CapEx. I mean, the actual amounts varies certainly by railroad and by year, but they have consistently spent a lot of money because they know that they've got to maintain a safe plant. And so that's vitally important. Every railroad, safety is job number one. And CapEx, because there has been such a freight boom and a lot of public-private partnerships, there has been sort of federal, state, local money that assists building projects that have a benefit not only to the railroad but to the public at large. So that has been pretty consistent. What has not necessarily been consistent, I think, is, and this has been the last 15 years, really since 2007, so maybe, almost 20 years, is the focus from Wall Street on railroad stock and how that has affected what railroads do. So prior to say 2007, railroads were not in anyone's crosshairs. Nobody cared about them from that perspective.
Sure.
The operating ratio was not a thing for anyone to focus on. And railroads had a pretty high operating ratio, right? It was like sometimes 90%. So that means for every dollar they earned, they spent 90 cents. After Wall Street got involved, and why they got involved, God, I think I have a quarter of the answer. I don't even have the whole answer. But why they got involved, that meant that a lot of things changed from how a railroad approached basically their employee base, their marketing campaigns, their strategies, et cetera. It changed everything, which is not to say they still spent on CapEx and they still spent on maintenance, but it did narrow kind of the field of things that they were willing to do. That has, culminating in this sort of precision scheduled railroading model, which really peaked at, call it 2018. That has subsided to some extent, but Wall Street is still very, very engaged in the railroads, and I don't see that going away anytime soon.
No, probably not. Well, as a previous customer, I always wanted the on-time service to be higher than the operating ratio. So may we hope we're all on that same path. I'm not sure that is the case, but we can
Yeah,
only hope.
that's right.
Yeah, so for those who are not as familiar with IANA, and we recognize that could be a subset of our listeners, tell us what role you want IANA to play going forward, and how do you plan to execute that?
Yeah. So what's interesting about IANA, or interesting to me, and I'll try to make it interesting to your listeners, is that we coalesce around a line of business, basically. We coalesce around the movement of a container and the things that are in a container. So it's not like we're a railroad association. It's not like we're a trucking association or an ocean carrier association or a chassis or any of these of those, but they're all members. We all are coalescing around the state of that business, the intermodal business, and how we can make the container move efficiently through, all the transportation moves. And so I guess what I would love for IANA not only is to have more people understand what IANA is and get engagement from our membership and get more engagement sort of public from a public perspective, but I really want to grow market share. And obviously not all of that is within IANA's control. We can't necessarily tilt the marketplace, but by getting out there more and by educating more people about the benefits of intermodal, the hope is then that translates into more customers. We call, I guess I should say, UP calls them the kind of watershed markets, the markets that are now over the road that we can convert into intermodal markets. So that seems like a huge responsibility for us to take on, but a critical one for the strength and vitality of the industry.
And are you looking at primarily mileage based? Because it used to be, oh, for intermodal to make sense, it had to be over 1,000 miles. But are you seeing, as you're looking more diligently, that transit time and number of miles is
Yeah, no, it shrunk a little bit. Yeah. So now remarkably, the kind of average length of haul is between 500 to 800 miles. And those markets that we're talking about that are going over the road, a lot of the 1,000 to 1,500 market is kind of up for grabs still for us. And
Hmm.
what's interesting, and I'm not going to get into the fight over whether or not there's a driver shortage because it's gotten vicious, but I think we can all agree that there are probably not enough drivers out there who want to take on those 1,000 to 1,500 mile routes for obvious reasons. So, intermodal then, that is a ripe market for us to go after.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as you look ahead, what market indicators are you looking at to determine if intermodal volume is going to increase? Because certainly it fluctuates, as you have mentioned, depending on what's happening in the trucking industry and then the economy in general. So how are you reading the market and what are you predicting for 2026 and beyond?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, there's kind of regulatory challenges that could crunch capacity, which we talked about over the road capacity being far too ample, probably. And so those include this English language proficiency requirement that has caught up some folks who don't have the basic language skills necessary to navigate, traveling on the open road in a semi. There are these other requirements about having a CDL that is properly credentialed. I did not realize that the FMCSA had loosened the standards for under which you can get a CDL. But so there are various CDL schools that don't really have like a standard framework from across states, which, again, that cracking down on that, which this administration says they will, that's going to be kind of a regulatory tightening of that capacity. However, we're not seeing a whole lot of capacity exiting yet. And so that means the rates are still pretty low. Again, with the regulatory tightening and then maybe more folks getting out of the marketplace, we just haven't seen that yet to any extent to make a big difference. I imagine we will see that more so next year. As to the rail side of it, I mean, the open question is what happens when UP and NS file their merger application on December 1st? What will that do to the service environment? I think UP and NS said we'll do nothing. It'll just continue to, they'll continue to run their railroad, and then, they will look for a review period, and BNSF and CSX will continue to collaborate on certain lanes, and it should be fine. But you just don't know what if there will be some sort of challenges in that front. You just can't predict.
Absolutely. So are you hearing anything from the shipper community about their confidence in intermodal and how they're looking at it going forward?
Yeah, I met with one of our member companies was kind enough to include me in a visit with one of their customers on Monday. And what I appreciated is that they seek out intermodal because of its sustainability, because of the rates, and because of the fact that, our member company who is an IMC, an intermodal marketing company, they work so well at finding available capacity across the move, and they can trust in that person to understand the marketplace and direct them well. And so in a way, it sounds like it's a hard-hearted discussion, like, oh, price and price and time, right? But it also is a relationship business. And so that to me is, getting back to increasing market share. It's also making sure that they understand that we are their partner, that we can help them make this move, that it's something that benefits them. And so what I heard was a lot of confidence in that relationship and a willingness to, of course there's going to be negotiation. They're going to drive a hard bargain every year, but, a willingness to talk and figure out what lanes work best using intermodal.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm glad that things are looking bright from a shipper perspective, and they'll certainly take advantage of all the amenities that the industry has to offer, I'm sure. So that's good news. So infrastructure and equipment capacity continue to be hot topics. How are the railroads and ports and motor carriers collaborating to address network fluidity and chassis availability? You mentioned that you have a very diverse group of members within IANA, so I'm sure there's a lot of good conversation taking place.
Yeah, it's sort of a tale of two cities, Michelle, because on the one hand, we have what we facilitate this uniform intermodal interchange agreement, which essentially provides the rules of the road and visibility into the driver community, the chassis community, the ocean carriers and the railroads. And so they are talking amongst themselves to the extent that they have an understanding and appreciation of where the equipment is, how to return it, where the empties go, all of that stuff. So from that perspective, it functions really well. But globally, I sometimes I think we're a little too siloed. And so part of, again, our mission is, if you're looking at it from a 50,000-foot level, if you're looking just in terms of like advocacy, what to advocate for any kind of, right now they're talking about a surface transportation reauthorization bill every 5 years. It used to be called the highway bill. Now they make it all fancy. They call it the surface transportation reauthorization bill. And, one of the sort of the objectives we have is, can we as an industry coalesce around, all right, what makes sense for us? What can make the infrastructure pinch points less pinchy? What can make the chassis providers function in a really good environment? And so that's one of the things, we hired our VP of Government Affairs, is she can go up on the Hill now and start advocating with those in mind of, we need permitting reform, for example. We really want freight mobility to be emphasized. What are the programs that can emphasize freight mobility? And so that's one of the ways we're trying to alleviate the siloization of our industry, is that having cross-modal representation on one of these critical committees. It's called the policy committee, so we can all talk to each other and address what we care about.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I wish your new associate all the best. She's got her work cut
I
out
know.
for her.
She has a lot of expectations on her, but I think she's up to the challenge.
Oh, good. Well, I'm good. That'll be great to watch. So talk to us about technology and innovation and what are you seeing in the space and how do you think it will impact things going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think there's such an emphasis on visibility for a few reasons. Visibility because of customer expectations, certainly, but also visibility defensively because of risk of cargo theft. And it's a lot of innovation around visibility, a lot of innovation around, detection and prevention as well when it comes to protecting your container and protecting or detecting if there is an intrusion into your container. AI is going to be part of that solution. One of our railroad members announced some things that they're working on with AI just to make themselves work more efficiently. One of the things I heard, and I'm going to botch, so paraphrasing, but one of our members' companies, they used to have a person count all the containers in the yard, their intermodal yard, and they would count the containers based on, bill of lading data, et cetera. And they would come up with what they thought would represented what was in the yard. And then they got a drone. The drone surveyed it. They crunched all the numbers and data and came up with a totally different number, a totally different container count. And so, which you trust, right? I mean, from that perspective, they are using different, more improved technology to just make it an efficiency. I think that is the future. Railroads are 200 years old, so they're not going to be early adopters to technology, but I do think that there is an openness and a willingness to adapt, change, improve. Again, though, cross collaboration so that they all can work with the same intelligence, I think would be helpful. And APIs, having integrations of data across the modes, maybe having IANA house those integrations is something to think about too, because we have a whole wealth of data that we retain, and that we want people to have access to, but we also can benefit from having their data as well.
Sure. Well, it certainly sounds like the future is bright on the technology front, and it'll be fun to see how that all plays out too.
Yeah, I don't think the robots are taking our jobs yet, but
I don't think so. I think you're safe, at least for a few years, for sure. So tell us, I know you mentioned you've got a new government affairs person coming on. How do you want IANA to engage with policymakers on regulations and what's on your advocacy radar right now? And where do you see the biggest opportunities for progress?
So I'm a former lobbyist, so I am one of those people. But I do believe that not only is it a constitutional right, but it is an obligation of any large industry or big company that can afford to do it to have a lobbyist or a presence on the Hill. And why is that? Well, there's 535 members of Congress. They are, I mean, they're not working right now, but when they are working, they are being shot at a billion different ideas, industries, issues. And how on earth are they supposed to understand that without having someone talk who has a knowledge base about that industry? So if we're not up there, then no one's hearing our name, no one's talking about intermodal. People are going to be self-interested. They'll talk about what concerns them. So we have to be up there, which is why we have this position of government affairs VP. What is on our list? It's, we have a disparate membership base, as we mentioned. So what can we all coalesce around? Well, we want a functional supply chain. We want to have some redress on cargo theft. There's currently no enforcement that we see that's really having a measurable impact. We want to have a surface transportation reauthorization bill that understands the importance of intermodal, about how big projects do need permitting reform, et cetera. And the last thing, I mean, we have some others, but we also want to appreciate the independent contractor um, element of our dray providers. 80% of those are independent contractors. And so to the extent there's any legislation or regulation that impedes their ability to operate, that's a tremendous concern to us, because then we lose a vital component of the whole transportation intermodal move. So we have those things. And what's great is we're not like the association of puppies and everybody loves us when we come in, but really people do. They like us because we're moving containers of consumer goods and things that people need. And they don't really no one's upset to see us. And so they want to hear our expertise. They want to hear how we can improve. And since we represent all of the modes, we can be kind of dispassionate about what advantages and, what advantages each one has and what disadvantages each one has.
Well, I think those are really noble causes, and I think what sometimes folks may not appreciate if they haven't spent much time in DC is that a few well communicated comments to the right people at the right time can do amazing things, but you have to be there and you have to be
You have
present
to be there.
and you have to hear your voice. So I'm excited for the future, and I think good things are going to be ahead for that for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. I think so.
Yes. So changing gears a little bit, obviously we are all trying to attract and retain the very best people in the transportation supply chain industry. And you have been one who, obviously you mentioned that you have your law degree, and so you have a passion for education, it would appear. Tell us what your view is about advanced education and why it's important.
Well, they keep talking about the aging population in the railroad industry specifically and the trucking industry. And so that's a genuine concern. And so how do you get the young folk, the cool young folk who are tech savvy, who have always been tech savvy because they've been raised around technology, how do you get them attracted and interested into an industry that they may never have heard about? Or if they are in a company that has some logistics interface or some intermodal interface, how can we make sure that we sharpen them, make them into leaders and protect, potential sort of the future of the industry? How do we do that? And so one of the ways we do that is through our scholarship program, where we provide money to the schools like University of Denver to select these potential candidates who can be developed into shining stars of the intermodal industry. And at the undergraduate level, they're folks who may have never even heard about intermodal or the supply chain. And now they're opening their eyes to, wow, this is a, multi-billion-dollar industry that I had never had heard of, and I could have a potential future here. The job climate's not great for those folks who are graduating from college, or even who are in the first 5 years of being in the workplace. And so having this industry that they may not have heard of, that's incredibly beneficial, not only to them, but to us.
Absolutely. And what advice would you offer to young professionals potentially interested in entering this lovely industry that we both know and love?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Michelle, I don't know how you feel about this. I mean, I feel like you should never be held fast to a 5-year plan. The most advantageous things that happen to me, and maybe to you, I never would have expected. And that's kind of how the logistics industry and transportation industry is, right? Wouldn't you agree that you just be open to the fact that where you start is not where necessarily where you're going to end, but you're going to learn through all of it. So being open to change, I think, is important. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. And you have to think big too. I only can imagine what potentially I could have been had I actually given more thought and had more aspirational dreams. I'm very, very pleased with how
Yeah,
my life
you did. What
worked
do you
out.
mean?
Yeah, I did okay. But if I'd given it more thought, I don't know if something else would have changed or not. But I
Yeah.
feel fortunate. And I love the industry. I mean, obviously I do. That's why I'm in it and continue to be in it. And I just feel like there's so much future opportunities and the technology is going to be amazing. And, supply chain is a microcosm of business in general. So you
Right.
can be, a supply chain IT person or a transportation and finance person and all that, all because the industry needs all of those roles to be successful. So hopefully we will continue as an industry to attract and retain the very best talent coming forward because we certainly need it. We have high hopes and expectations.
Well, that's right. So, if our market share of intermodal right now is around 5 or so%, how do we double it to 10? Well, I'm relying on those kids right now who are 21 years old or who are, if this is the first job in their career and they're at the University of Denver trying to learn more. I'm going to be relying on those folks to say, how do we get there?
Yes, yes. And there is a solution. So for
There is a
sure.
solution. That's right.
So I'd love to ask this last question because it was asked of me on a podcast, and it gave me an opportunity to recognize a mentor that I had in my career that was very impactful to me. And although he had passed away, I sent the little clip to his wife, and she forwarded it to the whole
Aw.
family. And it was like a really like, wow, I don't know if they knew how much they meant, how much he meant to me. And it was such a great opportunity to connect. So now I like to ask you, is there someone that you have worked with or was particularly meaningful in your life as you were kind of working through all these decisions and what you wanted to be when you grew up that was really influential?
Sure. I have two, both from CSX. Um, both bosses. One was my boss until he was relieved of having any direct reports. I'm just kidding. He's going to hate the way that I just I mean, he's great. No, the reason he's great is not only was he great at his job, he was a senior counsel at CSX, but he also was so tactful in the way he would tell me to grow the hell up. And so I am eternally grateful for it because I have memorialized everything he's told me. I now sort of has become second nature. So for example, I'll give you an example. So I remember I came back from maternity leave and you're already emotional and you're like, what the hell am I doing? And while I was gone, the project I was working on was given to somebody else. Well, obviously, right? I'm gone. It's not a big deal, but I couldn't, I was so mad and I was like pouting about it and letting everyone know. And he said two things. He said, first of all, Anne, there are many mansions, meaning there are many different jobs that you can do. And then he said, and when you go home to your mansion, you should kick the dog. Don't kick your coworkers. And by that he meant, you know, at a certain point, we're going to stop listening to you griping, right? Take it out on your dog and your husband at home. I would never kick my dog. She's adorable, but we understand what he was saying. So
Yeah.
that actually got me to kind of grow the hell up and become self-aware. And I think it's so important. Self-awareness is so important to everybody, but it's certainly important in the workspace. And then my boss, who was the chief legal officer at CSX, told me to be people first and have a moral compass. And, to me, that kind of leadership where you're focused on your people as opposed to yourself is not only better for you because then you don't have to have every expectation on your shoulders, but it's so much better on the people and knowing what the right thing to do is and how, even if it's hard, you do it. I mean, I don't know. That lesson should be taught by everybody, but thank God she, was so steadfast in that regard.
Oh, that's great. Yes. At Home Depot, we refer to that as a servant leadership model. And
Yes.
before Home Depot, I didn't have the vocabulary to explain what that was. But when I got there and they talked about it, I'm like, yes, this is the way things should happen in business.
Doesn't it seem like an epiphany? Like, why didn't I
Oh,
think
yes.
about this before? Right?
Yes, let's put our people first. Take
Yeah.
care of the people, they'll take care of the business, and the rest takes care of itself, which is what Bernie Marcus used to say at the Home Depot, and I fully buy into it.
Was
So
that your mentor?
no, unfortunately, Bernie had already left by the time I
Oh, okay.
Home Depot, but certainly so many great things that he passed down through the organization and the culture of Home Depot was really a lot to do with Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank and
Yeah,
lives on today. And it's really what makes Home Depot one of the special sauce for Home Depot, I would
that's
say.
right.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you all have internalized it long after he left, which
Oh,
is incredible,
absolutely.
right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's truly the culture is such an important part. And if you can build that culture, you can do that anywhere if you put the right emphasis on the right stuff, and let people know what's truly important. And taking care of your associates and taking care of your customers is really what it's all about in the end.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
takes humility, that's for sure. So it's
Yes.
not easy, but it's so important.
It is. It really is. Well, Anne, this was a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for spending time today with us. And we really appreciate all the information you shared. And I'm really excited for your journey and IANA's journey. And it just seems like you're poised for success and good things are going to happen. So we're going to look forward to watching all that you do going
I'm
forward.
knocking a lot of wood, Michelle.
I understand. But it's going to be great. I can tell. I mean, you've got the right attitude and approach, and it's going to be phenomenal. So I'm
Thank
excited
you.
for you.
Well, and
So,
I'm glad that I met you, and I'm glad that I'll get to see you often. So
yes,
thank you.
absolutely. And that's the best part of being in this industry because in the end, it is truly about your network. And it's so great to have you included in my network and thank you for including me in yours.
Thank
And
you.
we will continue to cross paths, and I look forward to it.
Me too.
On that note, I'll just thank everyone so much for your time today. Thanks for joining Transportation Talks. Know that you can visit YouTube, the University of Denver Transportation Supply Chain Institute, or LinkedIn for all the past episodes of Transportation Talks. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you again soon.